Next speaker is Bryce. I forgot to bring up the thing, so I don't remember what your session's called. I'm really good at emceeing today, guys. All right.
It's all good. I'm the fussy one that needs his own computer. So, wait, other side.
For the clicker too.
I probably won't use that.
Okay. There we go.
Hey, everybody. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. I hope everyone's doing good. I'm Bryce. I'm an Xbox designer, and I'm here to talk to you about an idea that I cannot get out of my head. It's called friction that fits. But first, I'm going to give you some background info. Across Microsoft, we are embracing inclusive design to fulfill our mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. This is a photo of a sign we have on campus. Obviously, it's the word inclusive in big letters, inclusion in big letters. It's written in Braille, and then there's the characters, there's the photos of the pictures of the sign language version of it as well. So we approach inclusive design at Microsoft starting from these three principles. And I'm going to read them because I can't memorize them. Recognize exclusion. Exclusion happens when we solve problems using our own biases. As Microsoft designers, we seek out exclusions and use them as opportunities to create new ideas and inclusive designs. I always want to read this one like Captain Kirk because it sounds like that for me. It's like, as Microsoft designers, we seek out exclusions to explore new ideas and create inclusive designs to boldly, you guys get it. My Kirk impression's awful. Learn from diversity. Human beings are the real experts in adapting to diversity. Inclusive design puts people in the center from the very start of the process, and those fresh and diverse perspectives are key to true insight. Solve for one, extend to many. Everyone has abilities and limits to those abilities. Designing for people with permanent disabilities actually results in designs that benefit people universally. Constraints are a beautiful thing. So, at Xbox, we care about the core a lot. But as I said earlier, we are intentionally examining our own biases so we can focus on gamers, all kinds of gamers. And Ian mentioned earlier Gaming for Everyone. That's what that program is. I am in that program. Ben is in that program. If you want to talk to us later about Gaming for Everyone at Xbox, we'd be happy to talk to you about it. We believe that solving for problems for people with unique needs leads to a mountain of happy customers across many spectrums of ability. It's the opposite of a funnel. So, solve for one, extend to many. We are not trying to design for all of us. We aspire to design for each of us. My kid made this, it's a little dark, but biggest fridge ever. When we discuss making things accessible, we often talk about removing barriers. And friction can be a barrier. Friction slows us down and makes us work harder. In UI design, friction is the opposite of effortless. It is the opposite of intuitive. And when we work on the Xbox OS, we are really focused on removing friction. But friction can be good. Here are some photos by Phil Toledano. You may have come across these as I did through Jane McGonigal's talk, Gaming Can Make a Better World. And as she says in her talk, if you're not a gamer, you might miss out on some of the nuance in these photos. You probably see a sense of urgency, a little bit of fear, but intense concentration and deep focus on tackling a really difficult problem. These are the faces of people who, against all odds, are on the verge of an epic win. Challenge is why we play games. Games are the combination of assonance and dissonance, conflict and resolution. They are cycles of tension and release. Great games don't remove friction. They have the best possible friction in the best places. I want people to strive to make their games challenging and universal. I want ergonomic experiences. I want adaptability. I want friction that fits. So many of us at Microsoft are enamored with the ideas of Todd Rose from his book, The End of Average. Has anyone heard of that book? I'm going to read you a little bit of it. In the 1940s, the US Air Force had a major problem. Its pilots could not keep control of their planes. At its worst point, 17 pilots crashed in a single day. The military blamed the men, citing pilot error as the most common reason in crash reports, which seemed reasonable since the planes themselves seldom malfunctioned. Pilots didn't understand it either. The only thing they knew for sure was that it wasn't their piloting skills. If it wasn't human or mechanical error, what was the problem? When the first cockpit was designed, the engineers had measured the physical dimensions of hundreds of male pilots. The possibility of female pilots was never a consideration, apparently. And they used this data to standardize the dimensions of the cockpit, the size and shape of the seat, the distance from the pedals to the stick, the height of the windshield, and even the shape of the helmets were all built to conform to the average dimensions of a pilot. The military hired a scientist to measure 4,000 pilots. He calculated the average physical dimensions relevant to design, height, chest, sleeve length, and formed the dimensions of the average pilot. Next, the scientists compared each individual pilot to the average pilot. The consensus among the Air Force researchers were that most would fit within this range. They were stunned when they tabulated how many fit within the average range. 0. None. Out of 4,000 pilots, no airmen fit within the average range. There is no such thing as an average pilot. If you've designed a cockpit to fit the average pilot, you've designed it to fit no one. So this practice of starting to design using averages was actually started in the Civil War. Before the Civil War, uniforms were custom sewn, but because there were so many people in the Civil War, they needed to be outfitted, they needed to do mass production. So that's where the sizing, small, medium, and large kind of came from. You know, things that we use in clothing today. And this reminds me of something very particular, and I hope it does it to you too, but easy, normal, hard. These buckets of skill. And I think we need to strive for a better fit than this. Enabling our games and our experiences to be tailored to each individual to fit is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to create truly personalized experiences for our gamers and to reach more people with what we create. So here are the settings in Forza Horizon 3. I appreciate how the difficulty settings are tackled. While you do have big buckets of difficulty, you have the ability to fine-tune elements to give you control about how you want to play. Easy by default has an experience bonus of 10%, but I can get assistance with braking, steering, traction, stability, while competing against more experienced drivers, and with a couple tweaks, like how I only move forward and never use rewind, I can get my experience bonus up to 25%. So I have the assistance I need, and I'm still competing. How can you extend the variables of your game's difficulty to be more flexible? So, most games have gamma settings. Brightness is an accessibility setting. It totally is. Seeing the game is accessibility. Straight up. Don't let anyone tell you different. How can you extend the idea of the brightness setting? Could you allow elements of your game to be brighter than others? And would this enable people to see things better? Could someone maintain focus more easily if they could darken elements that are distracting to them? Do you know what goes great with brightness? Contrast. Contrast and brightness are peanut butter and jelly. And people with low vision often ask us for high contrast interfaces. It's something we do in the shell, and we know there's a lot of good material on that. Did you know, according to the WHO, that for every person in the world who is completely blind, there are 7 with low vision? On Xbox One, a title has the ability to know whether or not that a gamer has set the high contrast setting. And so if you knew this for your game, how could you change your game's UI to make contrast better for that person? I know a gamer named Sightless Combat, and many of you in here know him as well. He is a gamer who's completely blind. He worked with Zachary Quarles, a sound designer at Xbox, on enhancing the sound settings of Killer Instinct in a way that it would tune the game so he could be more competitive. These are the default sound settings of KI. You can see that the HUD meter volume is set at 0. So this video shows how Sightless sets them. He turns the music way down, no music, and then he cranks the HUD volume all the way up. The HUD volume is a sonic representation of the shadow and KV meters, two things that you actually need to know if you really want to be competitive in Killer Instinct. Sightless also turns the announcer volume up just because he likes it. I know Zach really learned a lot from working with him on this, and it's been great talking with Sightless about how these types of sound enhancements can make games more accessible. So now let's take a look at Gears of War controller settings. This video's a little long here. Fine folks at Able Gamers have told me that they appreciate this setting here to toggle primary weapon. It makes it easier to switch between weapons. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Craig actually lobbied for the face trigger controller scheme, which is in the game. What it does is it moves the control of shooting from the trigger to the X button, which is something that they wouldn't have thought of if we didn't ask them for it. So another game here I'm going to look at, Forza Motorsport 6 has 14 controller layouts, covering a vast array of controller options. So Turn 10, who makes Forza, and the Coalition, who makes Gears, they've added these great controller customizations to their game to help more people play, but we need to do more. Has anyone in here heard about Copilot, which is something that we have in preview builds right now? Cool. Well, I'll tell the rest of you. Copilot is a mode that we designed as an assistive technology to meet a specific need. The way it works is that you take two controllers and we set them to act as one. But as I was saying earlier, we're seeing a lot of situational benefits from Copilot. So one of the things that we see is that now young kids can grab a controller and play with their parents, and maybe I can tell my 3-year-old to just fire or accelerate and I can steer, and it's a new type of co-play. And if you look at Xbox UK, they have a bunch of goofy YouTube videos that they're doing with co-play, or with Copilot as a new form of co-play. That word co a lot. We need people to tell us what you think about features like Copilot and about our controller settings. We really need you to tell us what we want, or what you want. So we'd love to hear it. And Copilot is just the start. So I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here. When I think about how new technologies can be applied to gaming, I see great possibilities for making games more tailored to the player. One of them is machine learning. I'd like to imagine a time when you fire up a new game and you start to play the tutorial, and that this onboarding process serves multiple purposes. Tutorials teach you how to play, but what if while you were playing it evaluates your abilities across multiple parameters and adjusts the difficulty setting accordingly? Tutorials and tuning in one. What if I only had to get good if I chose to play that way? We often talk about being able to skip parts of the game that are too difficult, but what if we didn't have parts of the game that were too difficult? What if we could design a game that a teenager with twitchy fingers could hit 20 buttons if they wanted to, or someone with one button could play the game and taking all the time in the world? I mean, I know it's a little bit hard to imagine, but it's something that I think we can kind of get to, and maybe I'm a dreamer, but it would be really cool. So, I'm going really quick today. But here's what I want to leave you with, actually. No one is average. Ergonomic barriers and fit is an opportunity. I want us to embrace the opportunities where someone might not be able to play on the spectrums that we have defined. And I want us to push the variables beyond what we think are a reasonable continuum of parameters. This will allow us to have more people play our games, whether they have a permanent impairment or a situational limitation. And maybe this is a big audacious goal, but I believe we will reach more people and we will be more successful for it. Thanks. That URL up there, the AKAMS Xbox A11Y feedback, that is a short URL to our feedback section of our accessibility request forms. Please go there. Please give us feedback. I'm Bryce J on Twitter. You can always hit me up too. Does anyone have any questions? No? All right. Thanks.